Hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and netnetradio.com, Tijuana. Today, Lai Talk and I are joined by, not by a musician, but a noted music Twitter personality. Alex, better known as Good Steely Dan Takes, emerged on the scene 4 years ago, documenting fruitful dialogues and happenings in the Steely Dan fandom. The account's been profiled in Rolling Stone and contained followers as legendary as the late David Crosby. How's it going, Alex?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, dude.
My triumphant return to college radio. It's been a long time.
Hell yeah, dude.
But,
well, we're like really stoked to get into college radio and like a bit and stuff. But before we like jump into that, how you doing out on the East Coast, dude?
I'm good, man. I mean, it's getting cold here this time of year, but other than that, yeah, I'm nothing new for me.
Where are you located? Like what state or city?
I live in New York City in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Sick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. What do you do for fun? What do you do for a living?
What do I do for a living or for fun or both?
Yeah, let's get into both.
Pick or poison?
Yeah. So, I mean, for a living, I've spent most of kind of my time recently doing kind of freelance editorial work. I work in publishing.
Oh, sick.
I worked in textbook publishing for, pretty much the last, 8 or 9 years.
That's cool.
I worked for McGraw-Hill and then a smaller company called Thames and Hudson. Right now, I'm just kind of doing more freelance stuff, though. Yeah, it's not super exciting, to be honest. Hence the Twitter. You know, it's a perfect distraction.
You never had like a sit down meeting at Hooflin Mitten or one of the big publishers, and you're sitting there going like, "Hey, we got to get some edits done."
I mean, it's not without revealing too much. It's not too far from what goes on in my daily life. So yeah.
Firm and fair.
So, I guess aside from working, what are you doing for fun, dude? Like, what do you like? I don't know. You did pick up any hobbies recently? You have any like hobbies outside of running a Steely Dan Twitter account?
No, the podcast is kind of sucking off a lot of my free time these days. But I'm a huge music fan. I love going to shows, and I've done music. Like I played in bands back in college, and I've done some of my own stuff. But
oh hell yeah.
Yeah, these days I'm not too active on that front. Actually, since the account started, I really haven't made any of my own music because I don't know. It's just I just haven't had time. But
what would you
friend shows or other shows? I like I go to record stores, especially when I'm like traveling. Like if I'm in a city I don't know well, and I don't even know where to go. I'm like, oh, I'll go to some record stores, and then usually around there there'll be cool things to do. Like there'll be coffee shops and bars and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I know that's like what I do too when I go to a new city.
That's what I'm doing this week. I'm on a trip to Guadalajara, Mexico for a wedding, and we've got 1 day free. So that literally is the plan. It's like, is there a bar and is there a record shop? I just want to see if there's any Mexican tapes, anything out of the ordinary I could find.
That'd be pretty sick. What were you playing in bands like when you were playing?
I guess because this is pre me getting into Steely Dan actually, so it wasn't anything in that realm. I would say it was more like shoegaze, psych pop, space rock, that more the psychedelic kind of thing.
Nice.
In the mid-aughts, in the late aughts.
Yeah, this would have been mid-aughts. Yeah.
Whoa.
Sick. Yeah. Can we find
That's actually the worst time for that kind of music. Like shoegaze had a revival after that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like we missed the window. Like if we had just stuck with it, me and the guys, we could have been huge. But we kind of went our separate ways, and we're all still really close friends. But we didn't stick. We didn't keep the band going after school. So unfortunately, yeah.
That's so funny to think about. It's such a weird, that's like such a weird time for a lot of that music because either the good albums of that time are online. So it's like the Fleeting Joy stuff, or it's like the LSD and the Search for God EP. I know people still go crazy for that from that late 2000s era. Or then it's like Autolux
I actually saw them when I was in college. Whoa. I drove like an hour and a half in the snow to see them and some other shoegaze band. Because it was just I went to school in upstate New York, so anytime there's any band that I had even heard of, we'd be like, let's find a way to get there. So
yeah.
Oh man,
that's sick.
But I'm trying to think of like the Japanese psych thing had kind of come into the picture, so we were influenced, by that stuff too, like Acid Mothers and Boredoms, Boris, were some big ones, and then like then like shoegaze kind of shit. Like I don't know how familiar you are with these bands, but like Spiritualized, Bardo Pond, Spacemen 3.
Yeah, for sure.
We got all the Spacemen 3 tapes hiding right on the side there. I think a good chunk of that stuff, and I still find the conversation, the dialogue, and the evolution fascinating. Like 5 years of just slowly going through that music.
Yeah.
It's funny because then I've gone into other realms, or I don't check it out as much, but it's like instead I've gone back to like the Japanese psych, it's like I'll rent a Boris album from the library, or I chase after oh god, what is it? The Psychic Discharge by Boris, or Soul Discharge. Love that release from them.
Yeah.
Early Boredoms.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, I haven't listened to a lot of that stuff in a while, but I should go back to it. It's been long.
Yeah.
A long time.
Before we switch topics here, I mean, I guess, can we find any of those old recordings?
Oh boy. I gotta I might need to ask my bandmates if they're cool with I'll definitely, I can send you them, over the email.
We'll link it on the YouTube video or something if they're cool with it later on.
That's
or something.
Cool with that. Yeah, I'll say the name of the band. So our senior year, we recorded our magnum opus was called Ooks and the Gentle Hobear, and our band was called Astral Lightning.
That's sick.
Oh man.
Yeah, and we played a few shows, and they were apparently very loud, but I don't know if they were considered good. But
your ears are still on, so
yeah,
you survived.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer.
Yeah,
lasted, but
well, that's sick, dude. I mean, I guess we can start hopping into I guess college radio. It looks like. How'd you get into college radio? When did you get involved? Like, what made you like want to get involved? I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so I guess, let's see. I'm going back a ways now. So my freshman year, it's funny because I wasn't a huge like music head when I got to college. Like,
yeah,
I wasn't the kind of person who was up on what was new and like knew a lot of bands. I mean, I knew some stuff just from being a kid who grew up in the suburbs. Like I knew classic rock. I knew, some of the more famous like alt rock bands like Smashing Pumpkins and like even Radiohead. I was like, this is weird. Like, this is sick. Like, or like I remember I heard somebody like in high school played me the Flaming Lips. I was like, this is like people are still making this music. This is like the Beatles. Like this isn't music that people make.
So
like I had no sense of anything. Like I was really kind of just a noob when it came to anything like on the cutting edge of music. And then when I got to college, I just happened to make friends with people who like new shit. So I just kind of stuck with that. And then they were doing college radio. So I was like, I want to do a radio show. That sounds fun. You just like, they had a nice studio. It was in like this cool basement, and they had all the they would send all the labels would send like the promo CDs to the station. So there would be these huge CD racks, and there was like all the new stuff.
Yeah.
So
that
kind of started the journey.
Both Thomas and I were music directors, and so a big kind of thing at the end of the 2010s there, and I don't even know what KCSB kind of does at this moment, but it was having to stay up to date with labels and trying to fight to get promotional CDs, specifically as they were cycling them out. And it's like streaming was great, and there was a lot of, we kind of built then from there, at least KCSB built like that network up to provide that for programmers, but the hunt for the physical CDs and the kind of library stuff there was really helpful for us before we were really even looking at online streaming or other platforms like SoulSeek. So
yeah,
I don't know. Just
so
that.
How does it work now? How does it work? Like the like, are there people still at like labels like telling you to listen to stuff and they send you like the link to it? I mean,
yeah, there still is, but they send like promo links and stuff and like downloads. CDs, not as much, but I know that the station right now, one of their current goals is like transitioning to like a digital library, like an internal, like, you know, where they can put like all of the CDs and all the downloads that they get that like any programmer can like access. But the main website they're using called Spinitron to try and do, it's been like an ongoing project for like ever. But Spinitron, or no, not Spinitron. What was it called, Maddie?
We had Spinitron.
Yeah, no, Spinitron. We use that to like log like plays and stuff and playlists.
We had that.
But shout out Spinitron. If you don't play something super obscure, it will mark that. And goodness, I forget the name of it. Thomas, it absolutely boggles my mind.
Well, anyways, I
was thinking about it last week.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. But anyways, that website or that program just like went down. So they're trying to find another one to like do an internal library type or what, like on.
I want to say it was Subsonic library or something.
It was Subsonic, yeah.
And Subsonic did work. That was the thing. But it was funny because, like, I don't know, if you stick as a music director, the one thing I learned from college radio, you'll network with a couple of different people, from random tape labels to random promoters that like you or whatever. And then you still just get sent stuff. And so, yeah, that was always something for the radio that was nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember because I actually did end up becoming music director. Like I stuck with the college radio. Yeah, I know I was for my whole senior year. I can't remember if I was my junior year. I think I was assistant. I actually can't remember, but I remember like they'd send the boxes of the CDs in the racks. I remember I came back from like winter break and it had been a month, and it was like that Twilight Zone episode where he just boxes of CDs. Because again, this is pre-Spotify, so this was like this is how you got music.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't So
were there any CDs that stick out to you in that time of like, oh my God, we got this early and this rules? Or were there any leaks at that time that you were chasing down and like really just kind of blown away by? It seems just so cool to go from your base knowledge being a little bit of kind of like classic rock radio and alt rock in a few years to then chasing that cutting edge. And I get that feel as well. Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember. I remember there were leaks. I'm trying to think about. I remember like playing CDs before they were like reviewed or out there,
before they were like released officially.
Yeah. I remember, and then they would be like, they'd blow up. I'm trying to think. TV on the radio, I think it was the first full length, Desperate Youth. I remember just seeing that on the racks and being like, what is this? Like, what is this band? I think it was my freshman year. Yeah, and I played it, and that first like song, like like it was just, I was immediately blown away. And then they like the next album after that like took them to the next. Like I think Cookie Mountain was the one after that.
I've just been revisiting Cookie Mountain this week, and what blows me away about that is that it's like very ahead almost sonically for doing things that now you'd almost think bands would want to do. There's a shoegaze component. There's a really heavy noise component that feels completely out of 2006, out of that time, but like it would fit perfectly now. Fun as hell. Listen, brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I remember because I remember that was just like I was pretty impressed by that. I don't know, there are others, but then other bands that kind of made it big. It was more of a gradual like word of mouth, like the Arcade Fire. I remember. Oh yeah, that wasn't like an immediate, like it kind of built when Funeral came out. I remember it kind of built the reputation kind of through word of mouth. I feel like. But
did you ever?
It's been a while. It's been a long.
Did you ever see like Arcade Fire back then?
I did not see them. No, I did. I mean, I did see so many of those other like indie rock bands from that time. Like, some of them a couple times, but I didn't. I remember I saw Fiery Furnaces.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been great.
A lot of stuff. I also helped book shows for the college.
And, nice. How was that?
That was intense. Yeah. I mean, again, in the early years, I was kind of more assisting. And then my senior year, I was like in charge, which was intense, but it was cool because I could control who I wanted to bring. I mean, I was kind of, I was playing with the school's money. I was like, all right, let's see, how much money do I have? Who do I want to see? But yeah. I mean, I learned a lot. Great learning experience. Yeah.
What was the radio station and like the university and stuff again?
I went to a school called Hamilton College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in Clinton, New York. It's sort of near the town of Utica. And the radio station is called WHCL 88.7. Shout out.
Sick.
Yeah.
Do you have like archives of like your shows? Like, do you have like have them in like files somewhere? I don't know.
What I have is this is what I would do, because I think at some point I figured out how to like access the files the songs I would play over like the school network.
Yeah.
But I think for the first couple of years, I would burn the songs that I was going to do onto a playlist on a CDR, and then I would take the CDR with me, and then I would just play the song. So I think somewhere I have them somewhere as all those CDRs.
Oh, that's really cool.
Each CD has all the songs that I played on that particular show, but I don't. Unfortunately, like the spoken,
Yeah, you don't have
anything
like the cut.
No, I don't have that. No, unfortunately.
Dude, that's pretty sick though. It'd be cool to like listen back. I don't know. I'm thinking like 15 years from now, if I like, after I'm done doing this, it'd be like sick to like listen back to like my actual shows or something. I don't know. But that's awesome, dude.
Yeah. No, I had a great experience. I mean, yeah, between booking the shows, doing like music was such a huge part of my college experience. Like it's what made it like really fun. Like even when my classes weren't, providing the, nourishment or whatever, I was like struggling to get through something. I was like, okay, like at least I had this kind of social life where I was like playing music in bands and, doing the college radio, booking shows. Like that was a whole, I'm still really close friends with a lot of my, a lot of the people I went to college with, and from this music kind of scene. That wasn't a scene, my friends that I did music with, like the two guys that I was in a band with my senior year, like they're still two of my really, really close friends. I talk to them like almost every day. So,
that's really sick.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, at least in the Rolling Stone interview, because you talk about doing the college radio and you shout out several little genres like, krautrock, komisch, and ambient music. And I'm just curious, are you keeping up with any ambient music right now, or keeping up like currently? What are you listening to that's not high fidelity music? What's just one thing you've heard this year that you're like,
oh gosh, I'm so out of it. It's not even funny, but God, that's a good question. Because I do see on Twitter, I follow people who are really in it. And I'm like, actually from doing the Twitter, I feel like I'm more into it now than I was for like a long time. I've just found cool people who like, or other bands that like post interesting stuff. So I really, really love this band called Fievel is Gloak.
Oh yeah, they're sick.
Wait, is it Fievel is Gloak or Fleevel is Glocke? I know who you're talking about though.
I have no idea how to say it, but they're sick.
Yeah, I didn't know either. And then I actually connected with Zach Phillips. He's like kind of the main guy. Yeah. He's the main songwriter. And I interviewed him for my podcast.
Oh, sick, dude.
So that was cool. So that's an example of just like, if I find a band and I think maybe they like Steely Dan, I'll probably try to like connect with them and interview them. So yeah, I'll give them a shout out because their album, I think it came out actually last year now, but it was called Flaming Swords. I thought that was a great album. And it kind of reminded me of almost a little bit more of the sort of indie rock thing that was going on when I was in college, because it was like all recorded to tape or like on tape. Like they didn't do any digital recording at all. So I don't know. A little bit of the DIY spirit mixed in with some of the kind of jazz technical proficiency of Steely Dan. So I like that. I like that mix a lot.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you say it again? 5L or?
I think it's 5L is Gloak.
Oh, 5L is Gloak. Yeah, they're awesome, dude. They've been like one of my favorites for a while too. They're just like such like easy listening. I feel like you can just like put them on and just like vibe. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, I'm realizing I didn't really answer your question because I don't know if I've listened to any ambient music like recently. I'm sorry. I can't.
Oh no, that's fine.
Yeah. If you name some names, I'd be like, oh yeah, I checked them out, but also probably not. I'm just kind of like, it's been hard to keep up, but.
No, I mean, I feel you on that. Like, it's hard to keep up because I'll wake up, I'll check the website formerly known as Twitter, and I'll be like, there's 3 or 4 new things here that I'm just not going to listen to. And they look incredible.
Yeah.
They look phenomenal, but it's like, you got to get the digital, or I check and it's like, is there a tape of this? Oh, there's not. Okay. We'll just put it kind of on the back burner, but there's always something great coming, and you're just kind of waiting for like the one fish that really reels you in. Mm-hmm. So I get that. I don't know. At night, I'll put on a random CD sometimes of something I bought or something I got free from my work. So it's like a bunch of Eric Satie piano pieces right now. Just be like, yeah, that's great.
That's sick.
That's the best way to do it, I find.
Sure. Yeah, that works.
Okay, so let me see where we're at. You come from New Jersey and you described it as like a classic rock state in your time growing up. What classic rock still holds a candle, and are there any rabbit holes or worlds there that you've gone down?
Worlds that I've gone down, let's see. Like specific bands or sort of like subgenres of classic rock, or
why not both?
Yeah.
Whatever gets you wherever.
I mean, yeah, I love a lot of that music. A lot of it's terrible or like doesn't hold up. A lot of it's great. Or like a common thing that happened was like the classic rock, the like 3 songs that they would just play over and over and over again were not like the good 3. Like that wasn't like the best representation of the band, like Steely Dan is such a perfect example.
Yeah.
Like, the 2 songs they would always play were Do It Again and Reel In. Which is nothing against those songs, but there's so much more to explore.
It's his first album. Like,
yeah, I mean, come on. They went far beyond those. Like,
yeah,
you get to like, Royal Scam and Asia and Gouch. It's like it opens up a whole nother world. So that's kind of fun, is to like take that, trip is like, a couple of the songs, like Grateful Dead's another one. Like they'd always play Truckin' and Casey Jones.
Yeah.
It's like Casey Jones. I mean, okay, fine. But like, there's so much more, so much other interesting, stuff going on there. So.
Yes. Yesterday at work, again, I work at a library, and we had a Grateful Dead book that came in through our patron returned it. And one of the people back there was asking, like, does anybody listen to Grateful Dead? And none of us did, because we weren't into the classic rock singles, and none of us had wanted to give the time for the jam component,
right.
Which wow, I'm not opposed to, because like I've got 10 gigs of Radiohead concerts on here. I've got a bunch of random other like live concerts or things I'll put on. I love those Odd Tecker mixes and stuff, but I'm like, no, thank you. I'm good for now. I don't want to go through the year 1972 with them, but it seems cool. But yeah, totally. Like you get an image that's not it. It's like my dad had Sirius XM for a bit. And it's like when you get Talk Talk on there and he doesn't know about the last 2 Talk Talk albums. It's like the primo example for like an indie kid. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Because those other 2 are wildly different, right? Like Spirit of Eden and what's it, Laughing Stock. It's like it took such a turn. But the early stuff is good too. But then
the early stuff is incredible.
Yeah, it's all good. It's just very different. Yeah, that's a good example. I guess one sort of rabbit hole is I think because I had that foundation like of that classic rock, I was able to kind of understand other genres more easily. So like krautrock is a great example. Like because I'd heard Black Sabbath, I could understand like I'm on Duel 2 or something. You know what I mean? Like not that far of a jump to go from, or like even this is a really weird example, but there's that Steve Miller Band song Jet Airliner, and if they play like the full version, there's this really weird like synth intro.
Oh, really?
Just like and it goes on for like 2 minutes, and then the song kicks in. Like if you understand that synth intro, like maybe you can understand like weird synth shit. So no, I feel like it's a good, foundational experience is to kind of just hear the same songs over and over again. And I don't know, something about that.
No, I think that's a great point. Like, I don't know, with the krautrock example and going back to, and I've talked about it with a few friends online, it's like with Public Image and Metal Box. There's a lot of like reference points to krautrocker stuff that John Linden loves from the 70s. And I've had friends who they hear the drums and they recognize, oh, those are krautrock drums. And they then kind of see that as an in to get to it. I think that's cool. I see that again, I don't know, as well as like random little power pop nuggets or stuff like with Big Star as well. That was like a big touch point for a lot of people I know that got into jangle pop or kind of modern power pop.
Oh, yeah. I can see that. Where should we go into next, Maddie?
Well, I think at this point we've kind of starting to tiptoe around, Alex, your introduction into the Damned, because you encountered it on classic radio. You met some people at that time in the mid-aughts when no one really cared about Steely Dan and they just were existing, living their best life out of kind of hipster culture or whatever. But I think the story that you have of really getting to know the band is beautiful. You heard them at a club, or you heard a Gaucho cut at a club on hi-fi surround sound, and you were blown away, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah, well, I had a friend who had been trying to get me into them for years, and I always kind of scoffed at it because of the kind of reputation that they had at the time among the sort of the indie rock crowd.
Had you read the Pitchfork review at the time for Two Against Nature, and were you aware of that? Or had you gone on like ILX's I Love Music? Were you aware of that forum and kind of, because they at least had been talking about Steely Dan for a few years, and there was like a weird convo kind of brewing there.
Oh yeah. No, I had no awareness of them. Like I just didn't ever really think about them. All I thought about was like they just weren't on my radar. I didn't like them. That's all I knew. I remember because the other thing that I remember specifically in college was I was listening to Ween. There's a Steely Dan kind of spoof they do called Pandy Fackler. And I remember I was like, I hate Steely Dan. Like, why are they doing the Steely Dan song? This is annoying. And I'd always skip that song because it reminded me of Steely Dan. So I know that I didn't like them. And I didn't really think about them. So yeah, I don't know if I'd read that Two Against Nature. I mean, I was definitely reading Pitchfork around that time. It's possible. I can't,
it is a very funny review. I will say that much. I think it's one of those Primo Brett pieces where he just randomly gets very mean, and it's like, go off, King.
I'm sure when he wrote it, he had no idea that people would be still like, he was would still be, picking it apart, 20 years later, 25 years later. But yeah, it's not far from kind of the consensus view of the band at the time. It's not. It wasn't like he was this lone wolf being like, actually, Steely Dan fucking sucks. Like that was a common thing. But yeah, I had this one friend who was really, really knowledgeable about all kinds of music and a very talented, musician and singer-songwriter himself. And when he recommended things, I would really take notice. So I was really surprised that he would always really pull for Steely Dan. He'd be like, no, Steely Dan is fucking amazing. And I'd be just like, what? Like, yeah. What are you talking about? They suck, right? And he's like, no, man. Like, I think he told me to listen to Katie Lied, and I didn't get it. Like, he shouldn't have recommended that one to me of all of them. It's the hardest one to start with. But so, yeah. And then finally, he played one night at a bar. He played me Babylon Sisters, and just the timing of the song and the vibe of the bar. Like, it was late night. It was kind of sparsely. I think we were like among the only ones there, and just it hit so hard. I had to. I had to listen to I had to get Asia and Gaucho. I think I got those two, like, I can't remember in what form, but I think I like maybe the next day or that week, I went and tracked those down. And then I was just like, this is just so
locked in.
Good.
Yeah.
Like, where has this been all my life? Like, this is just the greatest thing. Like, and then I went down the hole. I mean, the Dan hole, like I went down the rabbit hole. I listened to like, they became over the course of the next year, my favorite band. Like I listened to those 7 albums, like incessantly, almost nothing else. I just obsessed over, I found all these amazing songs that I had never heard, like Caves of Altamira, the ones that don't get played on the radio, Dr. Wu. Dr. Wu. There's just so many gems. Like every song is good.
That was, I don't know, at least Thomas, what was your experience getting into them? And then I'll share mine.
Yeah, I want to hear that.
I see.
Hear your guys.
I mean, my experience was honestly just like listening to the hits like on the radio and stuff. And then me and my friends kind of just like listening to them almost as like a joke. You know what I mean? That's like how it was like in the beginning. Like we just play like all this like, you know, dad rock and stuff and just be like, yeah, this is sick. You know what I mean? Just like drinking or something. But then it's like, okay, Steely Dan actually is like kind of sick. Like all jokes aside, you know, like we started being like, I remember like our group of friends just being like, okay, yeah, like Steely Dan's actually like good though. You know what I mean? And then, so yeah, like honestly, like I would just continue to listen to like the hits and then like Asia and stuff. And then Maddie, I remember in college was like, you got to listen to like Gaucho and everything. And like, that's like more when I like listen to that album and stuff. But yeah, before that, it was kind of just like listening to them as like a joke, you know?
At least by 2020, you still have that tape of your vinyl rip of Asia to cassette.
I do. Yeah, I did. I ripped that.
Oh, wow.
That was like one of the first things I ripped. Like when I hooked up like my tape player to like my stereo and found out I could like record and everything, I was like, yeah, I'm going to put Asia on tape so I can listen to this in like my car. But
I have a, definitely different story on that front. God, it's now been 11 years. That's wild because so in 2008, Rock Band 2 put Bodhisattva in the soundtrack. I did not notice that until I replayed the game in high school in 2012. And I had read some pieces because I was not trying to be a pro Rock Band or Guitar Hero player, but I was playing on hard and expert and just kind of goofing around and doing a terrible job with the solos and stuff. And Bodhisattva was put in the game specifically because it has a really unique solo that's very hard to do for a rhythm game. And Harmonix is really testing their player base there. But I loved it. I genuinely loved the solos. Had no clue what the hell this song was doing, what this band was exactly even about. But I realized that my parents, my very sweet cusp of Gen X, not quite boomers, born early 60s parents, had been listening to Steely Dan their entire lives. And at least at some point in the 2000s had imported Asia and the greatest hits into the computer. And there's a lot of them. I have 2 of those different greatest hits versions here on tape, but it's the one that only covers up to ABC Records. So I never heard Gaucho. I knew Asia in high school and I loved it. It became part of a holy trinity next to Radiohead and REM and Steely Dan, all bands that I cared about because of lyrics. I very rarely cared about bands for lyrics or that kind of content. For some reason, all 3 popped off to me. Loved them for just that aspect of like, why does this sound so good? Knew about the audiophile stuff, but never cared too deeply about the leaning. I thought it was hysterical, more or less, but it was like, I knew boomers loved this stuff. There's even one time I got a haircut in like 2017 and talked to a guy who was like, oh, in the 70s, we'd get baked and listen to Asia. And you just know it's like, that's a sleazy guy, but he loved it. He loved that stuff. Something kicked though, because I mean, it was always like music I would return to or kind of go about between 2012 to 2019. But then in 2019, the Gaucho cassette landed in my lap. And this is one of many copies of it I've got. But I heard it and I was like, oh my God, that opened up like a 4th eye with the band for me, not even a 3rd. And from then on out, it really was kind of enshrined like, oh yeah, Steely Dan is it. And that was right at that moment where a lot of stuff seemed to be converging online in ways that I was not anticipating. Mm-hmm. And I thought was really kind of funny. Just like, oh, a bunch of people suddenly realized this soft rock proto like yacht rock band kind of whatever giant studio project that bordered on self-parody but was very sincere and very good. Like, oh, we're all getting hip to it. Sweet. So it's been fun to watch. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like everybody's kind of come to some sort of collective realization, or at least at this point, whether you're down with the band or not,
Yeah.
That's what's kind of at least become more clear to me in the last 4 years is that there's been like an awakening of like, okay, the band is good, but then there's also a bit now to me of like a backlash or more of an acknowledgement. Like we can now start to have the conversations about, would you want to be in the room recording with these guys? I think earlier this year we had talked with another musician. It was Jake Acosta out in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I mean, like the big Steely Dan tweet of 2023 is it was the Steve Albini take.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And I really liked what Jake had to say about it as much as like, I like Steve Albini's take on it because he's a professional hater. So he comes from a realm of being able to kind of hate this stuff in a way that's just really funny to me, more than like, okay, cool. But Jake brought up the point of, would you really want to record or be there with these guys, like actually recording? It would be hell.
Yeah.
And it took them all. I had to like sit there for a while and be like, oh, you're right. Oh, not that like some giant mirror had shattered on the band for me, but I do get why people are kind of turned off by that, as much as I'm also, I don't know, it's like, it just kind of like cracked me up because, I don't know, so many little culture touch points that I had done, like taking a film noir class, reading a bunch of American literature or Asian American literature or kind of like other aesthetic lenses. It made Steely Dan really fun to analyze and go back to.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyways, though, I guess
that's
over any stuff. Alex, like again, kind of in your time there over, let's say 2008 to 2018, a giant realm of time. Where do you kind of see yourself as a Steely Dan fan going at some point in the mid to late 2010s? That were you considering like, oh, I might just start kind of posting about this more often? What was itching you to get into that realm?
I don't know. No, actually, it's funny because for a while after that initial, when I was just kind of really getting into them, I would kind of come in and out like any band does. Like I would go through periods where I would be really into them and then I would move on and listen to other music. I remember I saw them live for the first time in 2015, which was really fun.
Oh, sick.
I went with like a kind of a big group of friends. We were all kind of part of, we all were like, okay, now we can admit Steely Dan's great,
Yeah.
I think I literally turned 30 like a few weeks before that we went to the show. So I was like, okay, it's happening. But I didn't start really posting about them, I think until the pandemic or maybe a little bit before.
Before. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember I also... they do these, they haven't for a while, but for like the whole decade of the 10s, they would do these residencies at the Beacon Theater, which is on the Upper West Side in New York City, where they play like 6 nights in a row or even 8 nights.
Oh, that's insane.
Which is crazy. Yeah. And they would like get pretty good crowd. Like they could really sell tickets because they have this cult following. And they do albums, they do the album thing where they'll play an album straight through, and then they'll do the hits. So like they'll do like Asian night, or they'll do, Gaucho night. So I went to a couple of those. And the second one of those that I went to was just particularly like incredible. Like, and I hadn't been listening to Steely Dan, but I still wanted to see them. Like, okay, Steely Dan, they're doing the residency. Like, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did the Royal Scam start to finish, plus hits,
That's
plus
pretty
David
sick.
Crosby came on stage and
wow. You got David Crosby too? Because at the Santa Barbara show in 2019, he showed up there like, Donald was like, we got a little kid here from the town we want to bring up on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, David Crosby. And everyone went wild.
That's awesome.
Oh,
yeah. You just throw the Crows into that already amazing mix. It's legendary. So yeah, I saw that, and then after that show, I was just like, God, they're so fucking good. Like, and then I was listening to all the albums again, and thinking about these weird lyrics, and just like being like, what, Simon Stranger, that's a great. And I never really gave that one song, my full. That is a great fucking. So I was just getting back into it again.
Yeah.
And then that's when the posting started. It was I guess partially out of, I don't know, boredom at my job, because I'd been working at the same place and had the same position for like that was like the point, like the longest I'd ever had one job and like got one off. Like I was like on year 5 of my job. So I was just, I was like, oh, I'm going to,
get a little bored of
what's going on Twitter.
Yeah.
I started posting. And then right after that, New York shut down.
Oh,
like 2 months after I started the posting. And then I was at home. So again, still, a lot of time on my hands all of a sudden. So that's really when that year was the year that this whole thing this whole Steely Dan, becoming a guy who is like obsessed with Steely Dan and posts about it on Twitter and is like known for being a Steely Dan person. That's when that started. So
it's funny to think, I don't know, because like in 2019, there were 2 accounts that I saw that were starting to like really push for something, and it was making an impact, at least in my life personally. It was Insane Johnny, who was just running. It was a combination of Bill Nace and Steely Dan. And my brother, who was, God, how old is he at that time? He's 27 at that time or so. He's like, he pulls out his phone and he shows me the Bill Nace one. I think it's hysterical, and I never heard Bill Nace. And the next thing I know, I love that guy and his dumb noise music.
Yeah.
But, and it's not dumb. It's Bill Nace. But the Steely Dan stuff cracked me up. And all of a sudden, my brother, who had never listened to the band, just fell in love with them. Just like immediately, like that opened up his third eye for the band.
Oh, that's sick.
And the following winter in 2019, and the account shut down. I've never been able to find any of the videos, any proof of it. It was the Steely Dan Dance Edit Twitter account.
That's still out there. That's out there.
Okay, good. I'm really glad that's still out there, if it is in any capacity. I'd love to find the one that he did to Time Out of Mind. That one with like this like kids group, and they're like instructors cheering him on. It was so on beat. It was so funny. It psyched me up. I think that made it my favorite cut ultimately. Yeah. But like the knockout of those 2 accounts, I could see something was happening. And then Alex, your account just came out and was giving day after day just people talking about how much they enjoyed the band in kind of the pulpy, schlocky, sleazy way, really embellishing the character types, but also having fun, I think, and really like overthinking the band in ways that have been way more fun than other kind of fandoms or stuff I'd seen. Just like, how did you kind of know like what to curate? What was that hunt for in the early days for getting tweets, and how did it evolve over time?
Yeah, I definitely was into Insane as well. I remember some of my friends, because they knew I loved Steely Dan. They're like, there's this account that does like really Steely Dan weird memes. I was like, what? Yeah. And like, I was like, there's somebody else who's thinking about this band as much as I, because again, there wasn't this much like stuff going on, and like I guess there was, or I don't know. So I appreciated that. And then I remember I saw Steely Dance as well, which is actually run by Grace Spellman. She's I think she was a writer for The Ringer. Wow. She created that account. Yeah, and she only did it for a couple months, and it was like amazing, and then she kind of dropped off. I know those videos are still up, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I think what would happen is kind of like my friends would send me Insane stuff, but also they would send me any funny Steely Dan posts that they saw, because they knew I like Steely Dan. Same thing. So like yeah, like any of my friends who are like just follow more music Twitter people, like my friends from, college radio back in the day, or just like into music, they would just see something and they'd be like, here, look at this. This is like really funny. Like somebody did it. And there was like, it was happening pretty frequently. So then I was like, there's got to be something going on. And then I would literally just punch the word Steely Dan into Twitter and see what was out there. And there was like some of the funniest shit you'll ever read, just being posted by randos, like accounts I don't even know. It's like kids in New Zealand. I don't know, some guy in, Chicago, like really just who knows who's putting this shit out there, but it's like people who have like a really like sincere love, but also they have that sort of like ironic, detached view of the world, like something in that just kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's the same kind of person who might also be really into just being on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to share that with the world, and anything that was kind of in that realm. So it wasn't just like, Steely Dan is the best band ever. Like I wanted to do something that was just like, there had to be like a joke or just like something that reflected that they got what Steely Dan was about and got the kind of specific sensibility of Donald and Walter, or even if they were poking fun at it in a funny way. Like I kind of shudder to think if Donald has ever seen the account, because there's so many things that are like mocking his physical appearance and like it's all out of love, but it's like if I were Donald, I might be really offended. So but yeah, it's honestly been all out of love. I mean, it's just like it's pure worship at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, that was it. And I think I did like one a day was kind of the thing for a while. And that like there were enough that like I did it for like a year. And then I started to kind of branch out and do kind of other stuff, because I was just, I don't know. I started to make my own memes and just like post like interesting facts and like weird shit that I would find. And then just I kept listening to more. Like I started to explore kind of the outer realms, like all these weird solo albums they did in the 90s and 2000s, which sound like quite different than sort of the classic era. And
I think I've repeatedly turned down opportunities to get those albums on CD or tapes, because it's like the China Crisis and Nightfly. I go up to those, and it's funny. Like I got 2 copies of Nightfly tape and CD on the same day at a swap meet. And
hold on, I got some tapes actually. I want to.
Here we go. Here we go. Sorry. This is it. No, we're here for this. I got my little. This is the other great thing. Still an incredibly cheap band to pick up. I paid like under $30 for all of this.
Yeah.
Got a few deep cuts here. Okay, so you have a couple Nightflies. I got 3 tapes here. I think you'll be interested in. First one. This is Comic Period.
There you go.
This
is it a classic? Is this what I need in my life for 2024?
I mean, I love it all. So for me, that's always going to be a yes.
That's not a yes.
No, it's a great album actually. I love Comic Period. It's not as good as the Nightfly, but what is? So
yeah,
don't need. Great. He already made perfection too many times. Like
here's another one. This is Walter Becker's 11 Tracks of Whack. Which this is a fantastic album, and it's also a great window into the mind of Walter, because it's like with Steely Dan, you hear Donald, Donald is. You can hear his part of it, but it's like, what was Walter doing? Well, this is a pure Walter Becker experience. So,
one of the things I like, at least one of the like only pieces of 2000s, like really good Steely Dan media that's poking fun, is the Yacht Rock episode. And they don't let Donald talk. He can only talk in like jazz noise, basically. But Walter can actually talk, and he tells him what to do. And I thought that was such a great pick, because you don't hear a ton from Walter. And even like, I don't know, I remember the day he passed, and the really beautiful statement that Donald left of like, look, he had a hard life. Just like, let's leave it at that. But also, this man was my best friend, and we loved working together.
Yeah, Walter. I mean, it's that album is quite different than Steely Dan or even like the Donald. So like that's the furthest probably like outlier from the whole thing.
Even the China Crisis that he does.
Yeah, I almost think like the China Crisis is like closer to like Gaucho or the Nightfly than like his own solo album.
Sweet.
It's an odd album, but I think it's great. I think there's some really, really interesting lyrics and beautiful songs on it. The song Junkie Girl is really great. There's a song called Hat Too Flat about an alien. It's just a bizarre collection of little ditties. I don't know. Check it out.
Yeah, I've never dove into any of their solo albums. I feel like...
Oh, you've never even done the Nightfly?
Dude, I've never even done any of the solo albums. Yeah, Nightfly.
Oh, man. Nightfly could bring me to tears at times just because, like, it even gets written up. I think it's in, like, Simon Reynolds' Retromania. He offers a really strange praise of it because it's, like, the first all-digital album or something. It has the digital modernism.
Yeah.
But it's him looking right back at the immediate kind of 50s past.
Mm-hmm.
There's something very unique about it, of a certain kind of time and place that, again, could never be replicated. Anybody tried to do this album again, it would miss the point of what made it so special.
That's interesting. Yeah, one of these days I'll dive into it. I'll have to. Anyways, what were you going to say just before I interrupted, Maddie?
Oh, wait. I seem to have forgotten, but not that there was anything really terribly bad about that. I guess thinking about a couple of these other solo releases or other endeavors, like any other tracks that kind of stand out to you there? Certain things that you sought after or chased because of that?
Like, I'm trying to think. Like, I heard like songs I heard on the solo albums that I tried to.
I suppose, like, maybe not even or maybe not even Steely Dan or just solo albums, but because of this kind of sound. Material, that's like out there that kind of you've gotten or fallen into, and then I'll probably kind of stick it to another thing. Yeah. No,
that's fine. Like China Crisis is a good example because it's funny, you see these connections. So it's like you see, you wonder like, what were Donald and Walter doing in the 80s? And then it's like, oh, Walter produced all these albums, which is really interesting. And then there's this band China Crisis that he produced 2 albums of, one of which is like Diary of a Hollow Horse. I actually only listened to that for the first time pretty recently. I think it's just okay, but Flaunthian Perfection is a great album. I think that was the one you were just holding up, right? Yeah.
And it's funny because...
Yeah.
Or no, go on.
I was just going to say, it reminds me a lot of... or it's in the same kind of ballpark as Prefab Sprouts, Steve McQueen, which I think came out the same year, but that is really one of the greatest albums of all time, honestly.
And again, that's sort of where I was segueing into, because what strung up this entire conversation, why we were here, is because I was having a couple beers to myself. I write tape reviews for Tabs Out, so occasionally we do see something that has a Steely Dan quality to it. I got to give a shout out to a guy named Matt Zuckerman, who made a release called the Corner Office in 2020 for a New York tape label. That's the best piece of kind of doing sophisticated pop worship, or just sophisticated pop that's in the China Crisis, Donald Fagen vein there. But again, a pal that I'm in with, he was like, look, I've got this idea for a rate. Let's do Steely Dan's Gaucho. Let's do Prefab Sprout Steve McQueen. Let's do Blue Nile's Hats. Let's do Sade's Love Deluxe. Now, I love all those albums. A lot of people loved 3 out of 4 of those albums, or 2.5 out of 5 of those, because some people are very strange about the B-side of Steve McQueen. I don't have any qualms with it. I went and read Thomas Dolby's biography just to get any details on it, because I agree. Wow. I think I was really blown away by all of the stuff he did with Patty. I think that's just such an incredible catalog, and I really regret not getting to it sooner. But
it's a great album, and I think a lot of that, like, I'm pretty sure Patty has said that he was influenced by Steely Dan. I think that's on the record. I think I saw that. I don't want to say 100% for sure, but I'm pretty sure I've seen him give them, and it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense when you listen to it, but he has his own kind of distinct kind of way of doing things that's quite different than Steely Dan at the same time. Like, you can see how the two are similar, but like his lyrical sensibility is just coming from a different kind of, I don't know. I mean, they're both literary in a way.
Yeah.
Right. Like they both, but that it's a different thing.
It's interesting. Again, you mentioned that because it's like, at least for me, Patty's lyrics don't immediately stand out as like, oh, that's what I'd come to sonically. Brilliant. It's the fact also though that he has, it's the other vocalist in the band, she contributes, I think, a great just kind of foil to what he does. And so you get those cuts like, oh God, I'm forgetting the name. I know the American name, it's JJ. But it's their one big single, and it's one of the breakup songs on Steve McQueen. And he does a very sincere vocal take, and she does a very cold one. And that's just a great dynamic there. Mm. And then the other aspect that, and I give a lot of props to, it's like Thomas Dolby doesn't talk a ton in his book, his memoir, about working with Prefab Sprout, but he very clearly loves them. They called him to do the 1990 album, Jordan. And he was like, I don't want to do this. And he hears the demos and he's like, okay, I'll meet with them. And they tell him what they're doing. He's like, okay, I will do this 19-track album for you guys, because he loves them so much. And based on some details from Steve McQueen, Dolby also is far more at the wheel of that album than I think given credit. Mm-hmm. Only because it's like he's given 40 cuts by Patty and he listens to all of them. He's like, I think these 12 work. And he's using oh goodness, it's the Farlight. He's using the Farlight for kind of vocal takes or for helping to sequence it or do mixes of the album. And so you also have, just like with Steely Dan, that high-tech veneer or the integration of kind of a modern element that I think is really cool to see in pop music. And just like something that it's super, you can kind of sit back and acknowledge that. But then when you get to those Patty songs, or just something like Horsing Around, there's to me a pure joy and an excitement to that. And something very strange and completely just out of what you'd see from anybody else doing pop music in the 80s. I love it for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And then, I don't know, there's just also getting into, some of the actual like jazz fusion, like not the jazz fusion pop, but the actual fusion, itself, like stuff that, Wayne Shorter was doing, Weather Report or Herbie Hancock. It's not too far from, if you can understand, Asia, you can get into that. So yeah, I really like I love Miles, Electric Trade, but I really love Herbie's like kind of fusion period, Headhunters and Thrust and those albums. Is it Manchild? So yeah.
Headhunters was, I remember hearing that on the local jazz affiliate, member supported 88.3. That's my shout out for the day. I remember seeing that and I downloaded an MP3. I did a YouTube MP3 of it and put it on my iPod. And so I never got a tape of it when I had a chance. I have his early Blue Note stuff, which is not the same. Maiden Voyage is not the same. Watermelon Man is not the same. But Watermelon Man has always been a favorite piece for me. I didn't know until recently. I didn't hear Keith Jarrett until 2022. But like the credit he has on Gaucho, which I'm not quite, he doesn't produce the song and he doesn't write it, but they give him the credit. If you could help me fill in this trivia fact.
Yeah. So what happened was, there's this Keith Jarrett song called Long As You Know You're Living Yours. And it's sort of built around this really, really great kind of piano riff. Mm-hmm. And then you go and listen to the song Gaucho off of Gaucho. And it's also built around the piano riff. And they're strikingly similar. I mean, to the point where it's like, come on, like you ripped it off. Right. Mm-hmm. And, I believe when the album came out, nothing kind of came of the similarity, but it might have been a year or two after it came to Keith's attention, like, hey, Keith, there's this song called Gaucho and it sounds a lot like yours. And Keith actually sued Donald and Walter and I guess won the lawsuit. So he gets, I guess, a piece, he's considered a co-writing credit, and I think he gets a piece of the royalties from that song. Yeah.
Wow. Do you think in any ways that colored, because at least then later on in history, you have Steely Dan with the hip hop samples. And I think about the classic albums video where they're playing Black Bunnies. He starts singing it. One of the funniest little pieces.
When he does it, he breaks into Uptown Baby. That's the first and only time you'll ever get to see Donald Fagen rap on camera, probably. I don't even know if that can be considered rapping, but yeah. Then they sued Lord Tariq, right? Is that it's?
I think so.
For I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes them hypocrites or I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting because they kind of sampled Keith Jarrett on that Gaucho track, and then later, I mean they've been sampled, dozens of times by hip hop. They're major sources of sampling everyone from De La Soul to Ice Cube to Lord Tariq. Yeah, but the Uptown Baby was a big hit. So
I mean,
that's crazy.
So the De La Soul kind of stuff this year, they got I Know in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. So a whole new generation is going to hear I Know. They're going to hear the I Know from Peg, and maybe they'll get on that journey where in high school they're nerdy and they're like, "Wow, this is incredible."
Yeah, that's a common tale of like this, Steely Dan Renaissance or whatever that's going on. Like people said that they always had a soft spot for Steely Dan because of like hip hop, like from I Know and that song in particular. Because if you go from there to Peg and you hear Peg, it's just like, wow, this is such a good fucking song.
Yeah.
It always and like I've probably watched that classic albums piece like 6 or 7 on it just because I love to hear the solos that they know. It's like, no, that's not the solo that we needed. And to hear it just in the mix without any other stuff, I never had noticed how Polynesian it is. I never noticed the insanity that they are doing to Malcolm there, or Michael, on the vocals. Just like, what? But it works. And that's always been one of my favorite songs since I was like 15 or so. Just kind of new because I never heard something that was that strange. It was very jubilant, but also it had that classic kind of dark side to me. That's what I liked about it, is that the emotional kind of depth of it. You could view it or you could take in the highs and lows of a lot of things going on in a Steely Dan song and kind of navigate it.
Yeah, it's so great to see them really unpack all the crazy details that go into each track because there's a lot. I mean, even for a little 30-second bit, they spent, like days and days trying to get the right guitar solo. And it wasn't even going to be a guitar solo. I actually interviewed one of the engineers who worked on Asia. Her name is Lanice Bent. And she was like, yeah, they were going to do a synth solo there. But then like ABC said they needed the guitar solo because it wouldn't get radio play.
Oh, wild.
So they went back and they started bringing in the session guitarists and no one could do it. And then finally, Jay Graydon, who was like the epitome of a session guy. Like he's played on a million songs. He's literally, his nickname is The Rake because he rakes in work. Like he does these little bits. Like he was never in a band.
Yeah.
But he, like on the last day when they were like, okay, today's the day, you got to get the guitar solo or we'll have to like move on. He got it. So yeah, it's just, it's stuff like that I love. Something about Steely Dan, I love all the like the lore and like the stories because they were such weird guys, Donald and Walter, and they had such an interesting creative approach to making music, and just they're not the usual rock band. They're not the usual guys who went into rock stardom.
Yeah,
and they were just brilliant songwriters. So I don't know.
And again, kind of that brings me to something though that you brought up. It's like over the past few years, besides there's now like a new realm of kind of Steely Dan bootleg merch. There's
is there really?
From the sweatpants to the IGY hat. Oh yeah, I wish I would have got the IGY hat. I thought that was great. I mean, it's even going for I think $300 on Discogs right now. The MoFi edition of Asia on cassette to like the Japanese SACD. Like I always thought those were some of the funniest memes, like playing up the audiophile characteristic. But in that time, Alex, you kind of became like you got into the realm of podcasting. It's a really safe realm. It's great because you can just kind of sit back and do stuff like this. But you've been documenting and kind of low key archiving different little dispatches from the Steely Dan universe that we keep kind of moving farther away from the 70s. And these people don't get to tell these stories very often. So kind of on that realm, what has been the most enlightening thing about doing the podcast for you? What are some of the other stories or tidbits you've taken away?
I mean, the podcast was just like, because I've been doing the account, but I was like, I can't do variations on the same 5 jokes like for the rest of my life. Like at some point I had to do something else or just stop doing it. So it was kind of like, and a podcast seemed to make sense because it's kind of like just, I did college radio and it's like, it's not too difficult. Like you can kind of like we're doing tonight, you can just kind of hop on a Zoom with someone and shoot the shit. And it's not like, it's not, anybody can do it. So, what started was just at the beginning of the podcast, I was really just talking to like friends, or some of the like people that I connected with over Twitter, some writers and other musicians who I know are Steely Dan fans. But now I'm like actually interviewing people who were like working with Donald and Walter on those albums, which has been really interesting for me, just as someone who's been really immersed in the Steely Dan thing for the last few years, to actually talk to people who were there.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's almost like talking to people who are like part of the like Apollo program, like at NASA. Like I'm doing the deep. It's like they were part of this like deep historical event. But talking to some of the Asia engineers was really cool. I talked to Bill Schnee and Lenny Spent. They had some great stories. Like Bill Schnee was there the day Steve Gadd came in and did his drum part on Asia.
Oh, sick.
Which is like one of the greatest drumming like moments in the music history. The funny thing is
it moves me to tears. It moves me to tears. Like
it's just unbelievable. Yeah. And what's amazing is the thing that I learned from him while like in the act of recording, I hadn't seen it online anywhere, is that like, he also did the drums for that song, You Make Me Feel Like Dancing, which was like some big pop hit in the 70s that you always hear at the supermarket, like literally an hour before he did the Asia one.
Oh, really?
I would have never connected those two songs, but it was just like he was in the studio. It was like the same session. He did those two songs, which is unbelievable.
That's insane.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
No. Wow. It's hard. No, and it's hard to think about because that kind of circuit doesn't exist. It's almost like a classic Hollywood cinema style of like shooting films. And then it's like in the 60s and 70s, we got all these studio musicians. You have the Wrecking Crew kind of thing, like for doing this music.
Yeah.
And today, the best ancillary you could get would be guys in different Discord channels just being like, yeah, let me just start out a vocal take right now. And then an hour later coming back and doing it for another server. But it's like, that's not the same as this. That's wild to think about. Whoa.
When you talk to these dudes, do like they understand just like how legendary the work that they did is? Or is it kind of just like, you know what I mean? Like, do they understand that? Or is it kind of just like I did that, like whatever,
Yeah, I think it ranges. I mean, some of them do just because they've been asked about it so fucking much.
Oh, I see.
Obsessive fans like myself.
Yeah.
Like, they're probably tired of like this guy, Bill Schnee, he worked with like everybody. Like, and I've talked to people who worked with Beatles,
Oh, yeah.
Like Bill Schnee worked with the Beatles.
Oh, that's crazy.
Not while they were the Beatles, but like the solo stuff.
Yeah.
But he said the thing that he gets asked about the most is Steely Dan because he won a Grammy for Asia. He won.
Oh, I see.
And Gaucho, I think too. Yeah. So just, there are times when I'm like, I don't know if they fully realize like how much like their shit means to people.
Yeah.
Which is also like they know that it has a fan following, and they know that like Steely Dan made great music. I mean, they're so lauded. They're in the Hall of Fame. They won Best Album of the Year. Like they're really, really hugely respected, in the music industry as well. But sometimes I get the sense that maybe they're kind of just
like jaded a little bit, I guess, just because I don't know.
Yeah, they're professionals. To them,
that's what I'm saying.
The work that they did on those albums, it was just like a day at the office.
Yeah, for sure.
Like at the time, it probably didn't feel like it was going to be this big momentous thing, but then 45 years later, there's some nerd who's like, "Hey, will you talk to me about Steely Dan for my podcast?"
Yeah.
Some of them don't. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say some people don't actually want to be involved. Like I'll email certain people and they're like, I don't want to do anything related to Steely Dan. Sorry. Like
they'll actually tell you that? That's wild. Yeah.
They're just like, I won't say who, but like some people have been very gracious. They're just like, I'm like, I respect what you're doing, but I just don't want to, they don't want to.
That naturally, that comes about in this world for real. Even on our end, just certain people are just like, hey,
I don't want to, I don't want to talk about that. I'd rather like keep my career distanced from that. Yeah, it's interesting.
But yeah, personally, that would be a bucket list item to talk to anyone and everyone involved on the Cut Asia and ask about where's the synthesizer album. Whoever posted, that's the one take that lives in my head, I think, from the Twitter account is the person who said when you die and you get to heaven, you get to hear the unreleased album that sounds. It's just the Steely Dan synth album.
It's the final 30 seconds. That little like when they're layering the synths. That's the best. It's so fucking crazy because it's like it's so ahead of its time. Like it's where like Aphex Twin almost ends ahead of like where Aphex Twin was 10 years later, but they never did anything that sounds anything like that. Like they did this once. That beat is just so good.
And what amazes me then is, again, I've got a mom who's born in 1962, and same with my dad. So Asia comes out when they're 16, and she has distinctly, repeatedly said it over the past 2 years to me that she danced to that album as a teen. That was a top 40 album. That had like a bunch of kids got that and they were like, yeah, this rips. Just knew. Just like that was like the state of popular American
they were stoned, music. Man. It was all because of the weed.
They were stoned, they were drinking, but they were thrilled that there was music that could be, that like over the top crazy. I don't know. I mean, I like that first Boston album from 78. 2 thumbs up on my end, but that's no Gaucho. That's no Asia.
I was going through my parents' record collection when I was getting into records and stuff, and the only 2 Steely Dan records that they had were Asia and The Royal Scam. And yeah, those are what I was listening to. I honestly never got that into The Royal Scam, but of course Asia. But they were bumping that when they were kids too.
Yeah, my uncle, for his wedding present to me, was actually his record collection because it had just been sitting in his basement collecting dust for 40 years. So, I guess he found out that I collect records, and then he was like, I remember at my wedding, he was like, I have a lot of my old records. I'll send them to you. I was like, okay, not expecting him to do it. And then a week later, literally 12 boxes full of records.
That's wild.
So obviously the first thing I was like, let's see if he has any Steely. He had one Steely. He had a very an Asia that I would say is near mint. So that was.
Oh, that's sick.
Is it the yellow one? Is it the yellow vinyl?
No, I think it's the regular one. I don't know. I can't remember.
I have seen the yellow vinyl, and I was I'm like, sick. They put that on color? I was amazed by that.
Yeah, that's pretty sick. I didn't know they did that.
That brings up though another. Back in 2021, I had down in San Diego, somebody had put on Craigslist bunch of cassettes, 200 plus, and they kept dropping the price until it was $100. And it's this boomer that's living in a lush apartment. And I go out and I meet him in the parking lot, and I was really fascinated by his collection because it was REM's Automatic for the People, Katie Lang, a bunch of Sade, some random Windham Hill samplers, Citizen Steely Dan without the box, but he had the Citizen Steely Dan. And I finally heard the mix of Gaucho that's on this is incredible on hi-fi speakers. You hear just an extra layer of detail. That's where I got the China Crisis. And I was amazed. Just look, it was Tears for Fears. a handful of other things but like to see like there was kind of that uniting force of coming back to like Sade or Steely Dan in that collection and seeing that and seeing like, oh, that really colored your buying, that colored what you were listening to, where you were in 1992 or 93 and what you like loved. And it's really cool. I love whenever that opportunity comes up to get somebody's record collection, or you can see a collection and kind of wonder like how that's curated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh yeah.
You see their own musical journey through what they collected, I've never done that. I've always only bought tapes like at record stores. I've never bought someone's collection. Maybe I should look. It's hard in New York because shit gets like snapped up really fast.
I can see that,
does. Yeah. It's very hard down here. And I had to like break up from OfferUp because of a terrible, like I just stopped looking on the app because of a day I wasted trying to get somebody's collection just to get Napa Valley racks. They had some stuff that I was like, that would be cool to have, or I could resell, or I'd give to Thomas. And I just didn't want to have to deal with that again. I felt too lucky already with what I'd picked up here.
Yeah.
So you're a big tape collector in general, both of you, or just?
Oh, Maddie is the biggest tape collector I know, and then I try to keep up.
2000.
Yeah, that's a decent.
I'm not quite sure. There's still like I gotta catalog my industrial tapes and some pop stuff, and I was bidding on a lot of 75 last week that I lost, thank God, but they just keep coming.
Yeah.
I got, what was it? I just got Fad Gadget today.
Hell yeah.
Mute Record guy. He passed away in 2003 or so, and his legacy is like a UK kind of synth pop, like
that's
torchbearer or kind of ne'er-do-well, has never quite been enshrined, but I found his greatest hits CD at the library and I loved it. I thought like, oh yeah, no, I need to check this out. I never really dove into that world, but it's good. I don't know. Like I used cassettes as a way to connect with 80s and 90s music that I hadn't been able to. And then also keep up with new stuff that's like really on that underground level, like Favel is Claquet, to kind of like see what was going on there. But
yeah, because they're kind of in that, like they're in the tape kind of.
Yeah, like the indie realm. Yeah,
totally.
For sure.
Yeah.
And part of it is that, and this place to Steely Dan, it's like, I paid probably $5 to $10 for certain Steely Dan CDs throughout swap meets in the 2010s, and then was finding the tapes for like $1, $3.
Yeah, tapes are sick because they're physicals and you can find them for very cheap. Like vinyl, like a vinyl equivalent is going to be like $20-$30 more compared to like a cassette usually. That's one of the main reasons why I switched to cassettes. I mean, I still collect vinyl, but like cassettes, it's like usually way cheaper. So
yeah. And I know audiophiles swear by vinyl over cassette, but cassettes have such a nice nostalgic sort of warbly. I don't know. There's something about the sound of cassettes that
cassettes are sick.
Nostalgic for me. Yeah.
Once I will say is like I still need to listen through all those Citizen Steely Dan tapes on the Hi-Fi, which is a 4-speaker setup on like a Yamaha tape deck, but it does match. If the only thing I would need is like a subwoofer or something that's bringing up bass, but I full-heartedly came around like, no, if you actually have the setup and the technology for this, it gives you basically the same thing. If it was recorded analog, that's just an extra bonus. I mean, again, same thing for vinyl there, but the mixes on a lot of those is really that good.
Yeah.
And I give a lot of prop. If the tape is bad quality, it's probably because the tape player needs to be cleaned or you just need to put a new pad in the tape. A lot of that stuff with good headphones plays very well. And I think makes for great mixes, or just, that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to stick with that.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Although of course I've still got those CDs. Good God, I would not. Steely Dan it's an audiophile band. You got to get the CDs.
Yeah. I don't even know how much I have it's scattered. I have some Steely Dan stuff on CD, some on tape, some on vinyl, but I think I have everything at least in one physical version of just about everything at this point. So
that was the, I guess that's one of the final kind of details here. We come to the final round. It's like, this would have been about 2 years ago. I tweeted at the account because I found in someone's house, like going through and just buying tapes for $1. It was this edition of Gaucho that was sold on a military base.
Oh, wow.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And to think in like 1980 to 1985, you're just on a military base in some foreign country and you're like, oh, it's Gaucho.
Yeah.
And somebody bought that. That blows my mind.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, that they had like a specific edition like just for that.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, what else do we have going on here, Maddie?
Honestly, I think we're kind of just at like closing round, lightning round questions here. Alex, in regards to like favorite Steely Dan album you think is most underrated, Steely Dan cut you love that people don't talk about.
I mean, at this point, it's hard to say any of them are underrated. I guess I'll give a shout out to Everything Must Go, just because
there you go.
No one ever talks about it. And it's still good. It's not as good as, Asia. It's not as good as, Katie Lied, but it's still a great album. So yeah, of the whole thing, I think Katie Lied is also a bit underrated. I love that album. I think it's so good. Like Dr. Wu is like one of my, if not my favorite Steely Dan song. Like, it's just incredible.
A greatest hits classic. That on the greatest hits would always.
It's on it. Yeah, it's made a lot of the greatest hits. Not all of them, but because there's different, there's a whole bunch of different ones.
There's like 4 of them. Yeah. I asked a friend, I'm like, which greatest hits version did you hear? And he's like, the red Yeezus strip one. And I was like, yeah, that's the one I heard in high school. Immediately.
The artwork is increasingly worse with each edition too. There's one where it's just like Steely Dan and graffiti on a yellow garage. That's some of the worst dog shit artwork I've ever seen. I think it's the one that came out like in the early 2000s.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Dr. Wu is a cusp greatest hits cut, but for me, and if I were, curating a Steely Dan greatest hits, it would be easily on there. Sign and Stranger, I always throw some love to. I think it's just such a great song.
Yeah.
Anything off Gaucho, I think is like just perfect. I mean, that there's just not a bad second on that record. I love the lyrical universe of it. I love the sound of it. It's just, perfect album. My favorite album by them.
Have you seen, there's a crazy post on Song Meanings, and this took Steve, I remember back in 2019 or 2020, I sent it to Thomas, and that like upped my appreciation of Gaucho to the next level. The guy who goes through Glamorous Profession, and
I think I've seen this.
Yeah, and talks about this is what each verse is talking about, and is able to connect them to 3 different people. And it's like, how did you do this? It's so over the top and insane. But
I have actually seen that because someone did a post where it was just that whole post, and then it was like the "It's Always Sunny" meme where he's got like the board. It's like this guy was probably up all night on God knows what. Like he's like, all right, I'm gonna do it tonight. I'm gonna figure out what the fuck Glamour Profession is about, and just he goes like line by line, right? Like
line by line. He's able to get down to to like a basketball game, the Hoops McCann basketball game, and it's like nobody knows this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Those are like, it's like a next level, like John Boy's of 20th century, like Steely Danning. But it adds to the song in a way that I never anticipated or realized, like, oh yeah, these people knew. Again, we talked about that earlier. It's like they were very creative and they had all this control over what they were doing, and they could observe Los Angeles to some degree. They knew things that were happening, it seems. And so they wrote these cuts that, could satirize it or really pay homage to it, but in a way that only decades later, a crazy guy online would try to untangle.
Yeah, that's a fun part of being a Steely Dan fan. If you take it to that next level, when you start to like analyze the like hidden meanings in the songs, because a lot of the lyrics are they're weird and ambiguous, but they're clearly about something. Like there's some sort of there is an idea behind them. They're
beverages.
They communicate something, but there's the beverages. Yeah. Even if that's all you get from Steely Dan, that's great, because there's enough obscure beverage. Like if you drank one beverage reference in a Steely Dan song, you'd be good for a few weeks. So
no, and even like, I don't know, I guess for me, at least I'd say it's Pretzel Logic of all of them, mainly because it's tied to not the song as much. It's actually Night by Night or the final cut on it. Night by Night made like a mixtape I did for my car in 2015. I love that cut to death. It's so over the top. But I love that final cut they do, which is it's the Monkey in Your Soul. Monkey in Your Soul is so weird. It's to me, that's where like Steely Dan discovers the show tune or kind of vaudeville characteristic that guides them to the end.
Yeah.
That hadn't quite been uncovered, because they were a band unit. They had been a band, and they were making really good band songs there on Countdown to Ecstasy. But yeah, definitely Pretzel's something that I'm well due for a return to.
Yeah, that one's good.
Yeah. Yeah, they actually let Walter sing Monkey in Your Soul live.
Oh, that's interesting.
They only toured it because I've actually gone back and watched some of the concerts. And I don't know what year it was, but they threw Monkey in Your Soul into the set list, and Walter would take the lead on it. So that's out there. Yeah. He would do quite a few of them, actually. Like, and every, tour run, they'd give two of the classic band songs to Walter. So I know he also did, Daddy Don't Live. New York City No More. He did Haitian Divorce for a while. A couple others. So yeah. I guess Don needed a break, so let Walter sing a couple tunes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, besides, I guess, maybe the final thing we should ask about would be the second arrangement. In your quest, what role at least did you play in at all trying to help kind of figure out what the status of it located? How have you felt now that a version of it exists here in 2023 for the fans on bootleg sites and such?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really take any credit for manifesting it into the world. I mean, if anything, I just made more people aware of its existence, So in the years before, like in the years leading up to this year, so like 2020 through 2022, I'd often make jokes and post about how there's this song off Gaucho that's incredible that, got accidentally erased. And then there were some demos, but they were pretty shitty sounding. But I would dig through those, and I'd play the best ones that some of them were okay. So I'd post those. But then what happened this year was Roger Nichols, who was Steely Dan's longtime engineer, who passed away about 10 years ago, his daughter, Simpsy, found a tape of the song and actually took the care to digitize it and shared it on her, I guess it was her YouTube page. And it was by far, it sounded great. It was close to what the where they had left off, because the song got erased, right? Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be on Gaucho. Sorry, I should have summarized before I brought this up. Basically what happened was there was a song called The Second Arrangement. It was supposed to go on Gaucho. An engineer accidentally erased the tape that they had saved it on, and then instead of trying to start over and re-record it, they just said, fuck it, we're going to go to the next song. But
oh, interesting.
What happened was literally this year, after 43 years after the fact, the daughter of one of the engineers who worked on the album found a pretty good copy of the tape and got it digitized and posted it, and it was by far the best version that anyone had heard. So finally,
oh, that's wild.
This sort of mythical song, called The Second Arrangement, got to be heard, and it was just great to hear it. I mean, apparently Donald is not happy that it's out there and has.
Oh, really?
He had Universal go and take down all the YouTube clips of it. So it's floating it's back in the kind of bootleg ether, I suppose. But yeah, it was just a kind of a fun moment when we all kind of, geeked out about finally hearing it and finally hearing a clean copy of it. I interviewed Simpsy for my podcast, and
the one that
shared the story. Yeah, she shares the whole story about how she found the tape and everything. Yeah, and how it was like this emotional journey for her. But yeah, it was cool.
That's tight.
It's a good song too, so check it out.
I'll have to look it up.
Well, I guess it's hard to check out now, but
you can at least get the demo. I never found. I mean, this at least upped it to that next level. But I always appreciated the demo, and I can immediately it's such an iconic opening 8 bars or whatever. That it's got that spunk. That was the thing, is that if that was on Gaucho, it'd be like, oh man, this would truly be the perfect, like, it'd be like the 11 out of 10, like some unattainable. That to me is what makes Gaucho perfect, is that you end with Third World Man, a cut that I'm like, oh, I don't know about this one. And then you're like, no, this one slaps. And I do recommend, if you ever get a chance, play it on a cassette and slightly turn the pitch up. I always never been a big fan of the down tempo kind of pacing of it, but ever so slightly turned up, I'm like, oh, that just adds an extra little fun to it.
Yeah.
So I've come around to
that song was actually recorded during the Asia session.
Oh, it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was just the guitar solo.
No, the whole thing pretty much was, but what happened was they didn't end up putting it on Asia, and then when the second arrangement got erased, they're like, we need another song, because 6 songs is too short.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So they went back and they were like, we have this other song. It was actually called Were You Blind That Day? It had a different title.
Yeah.
And so Donald sang new lyrics over it. But all the, like, I believe everything else was like the Larry Carlton's guitar solo. That was actually recorded like 3 years before.
Yeah.
Like during the Asia session. A lot of most of
the stuff online had been, because I knew it's like, okay, there's some aspect of this that comes from Asia, but I could not tell if the song had actually been done for Gaucho in lieu of, and they were taking that guitar solo element that just happened to work. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Okay, so it literally is just an Asia holdover with new lyrics.
Yeah, I mean, I think they added a few other bits and pieces here and there, so they did some more overdubs, but like the core of the song was, and there are demos of the Asia version too. They're out there. So it's called Were You Blind That Day? It's great. I actually like the lyrics on the Asia version better. I don't know why they went and changed it. Donald overthought that one, but
he really did. It's just like, yeah, man. Okay. I know one guy who criticized the cut because he's like, it's like, this could be a really like great cut about a vet returning home, and then it has to be Steely Dan. I'm like, you might have missed it a little too hard there. Okay.
Yeah, it's always fun to hear people's wild interpretations of the song, because people go in all kinds of interest, like that glamour profession thing you were saying, or just, I don't know.
Yeah.
People have idea. It's actually a concept album, man. It's the same character on every song. I've heard that about Gaucho. Like, it's actually the same guy in every song. It's like he's living. It's like, okay, well,
maybe
I have to go back and listen.
First two. Oh, good times.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas,
does that bring us towards the end here?
I think that does.
Where can people keep up with all things the podcast? What's the Twitter handle, etc.?
The Twitter handle is Bad Dan Takes. Yeah,
cool.
At Bad Dan Takes, and then from there you can find the pod, and yeah, it's pretty much that in the podcast. So
tight. Well, any last thoughts, Maddie, before we close out here?
I just think it's been fun to do a slightly different interview than we usually do. Alex, welcome back to the world of college radio, and welcome to the world of podcasting formal.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been fun to re-enter that realm for sure. So thanks for having me on. And yeah, Zoom, it's a little different than being on the mics, Nightfly style.
Yeah.
This is great too. So thanks so much for having me.
For sure.
For letting us just have a nice little ramble there.